Hello, darlings. Maria West here. Welcome to Love, Truth, and Beauty, episode 294. This is our 8th installment of my video series, Conversations with Men. And today, my beautiful guest is a man whose content, delivery style, even his name, has the power to evoke fear in some, but also has the power to invoke divine inspiration. He's the genius behind the vast website, whatonearthishappening.com, where you can find all of his videos, all of his teachings, his seminars, even his latest documentary that was co-produced with our friends Leah Boone and Joel Torres, called Mark Passio and the Science of Natural Law documentary. He's also the genius behind onegreatworknetwork.com, which is a beautiful platform of like-minded, like-hearted content creators of truth, anarchy, sovereignty, and proponents of natural law, of which I have the privilege of being a part of. He's also the genius behind his course called How to Become the True Media, where he takes folks step by step by step on all the things that you have to do to not only create your own platform, but start creating content and disseminating the information of truth, sovereignty, anarchy, natural law. He's also the lead singer of a wonderful punk rock band, which I love so much, The Founders, and co-founder of the Free Your Mind conferences, also based in Philadelphia. Please welcome one of my great mentors, Mark Passio. Hey, Mark, how are
Maria,
you?
thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. It's great to be here today with you.
Oh, you're so very welcome. My pleasure. How's it going over there in Philly?
It's going okay. I'm hanging in there, just pressing forward with all of my work. We're in the middle of the How to Become the True Media seminar during the second half of the year. It's going really well.
Beautiful.
All the students seem to be enjoying it and doing very well in the class. So I'm happy that that's progressing along. And next year, early next year in January, we'll be getting back to the What on Earth is Happening podcast as well.
Wow, beautiful. You are a very, very busy man. And you know what? I am so grateful. I came upon your work through my friend Shad, he's a musician friend of mine. He's no longer with us, but hardcore punk. And I had to be 2000, early 2009. And he's like, dude, do you know this dude's work? And I didn't know. And he goes, he's just like you. He's pissed and he's fucking over just all the zombie shit shows. And so I had to check you. I was hooked because I was weaving in, not just my trauma deactivation work with my survivors of trafficking, but also like creating a lot of music just based around all my work, natural law, the Hermetic principles. I mean, just all kinds of stuff. And people look at me and go, what's this little thing going to do? And then boom, I'm out there, I'm coming unhinged. So when I came upon your work, I was like, oh, thank God there's somebody else who understands, because I think for me being here for so long at this point, I'm over 60. It's like, holy moly, what is it going to take for people to like, hello, we don't have that much time, and then I have to check myself, because then I have to apply the natural law principles and get myself out of, what I've been sucked into, the despair and the anger and the frustration. I mean, how do you do it?
We all experience that. I mean, I'm no different in many regards, with the level of frustration that I feel sometimes. And we just have to power through that.
Yeah.
How I deal with it is I thrust myself into the work, creating content, delivering, seminars, hosting online seminars to teach other people how to do this. I feel better the more I feel other people are progressing in knowing how to teach this material.
Yes.
See, my approach has been not so much to get as many followers as possible, although everyone wants to be able to reach people's minds and influence them for the better and teach them natural law and objective morality, of course. But my main goal, actually, a lot of people don't know this, has always been to try to create other teachers of this material and of this great work.
Beautiful.
And I feel the best when I feel people are really learning those methods, when they're learning the methodologies of how to teach this, how to go about creating content themselves. That's what makes me feel like progress is being made. So those are the kind of things that I try to
Yeah.
work toward to avoid those feelings of despair and
Yeah.
possibly hopelessness that we can't work our way out of this
Yeah.
situation. I still think it's possible. I still think we can, even in this late hour. If I didn't, I wouldn't be saying a word. I wouldn't be doing
Yeah,
anything.
me as well. I'm right.
Yeah.
I'm right with you on that. So one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is because, and since I've been part of One Great Work Network.com, that's been amazing because there have been a lot of people coming toward me and, asking me the questions. And I know I come across, as kind of this mommy and this kind of grandma, because I do have children and I do have grandkids, about how to apply the great inner work, creating content, and to keep your shit straight in relationships, and in particular, unwinding really the mind control and it's trauma-based mind control of the divide and conquer, the war of the sexes between the masculine and feminine, men and women, and then you have the divvying up of the gender divides with the 92 freaking pronouns. Oh my God, I can't take it sometimes. And so I know for myself as a woman, I have a certain perspective. So I'm very curious about your perspective as a man, and you're such a great mentor for these young kids that are like coming up.
Well, thank you for saying that. And yes, of course, I've recognized that one of the biggest dialectics in our world, the biggest divide and conquer strategy, is to divide men versus women. If you divide the genders, you have a 50-50, practically a perfect 50-50 split. So that's one of the most effective methods of manipulation that are used by the sorcerers of our world, the mind controllers, if you will. I spoke to this a lot in my previous work, in my podcasts and in presentations such as Unholy Feminine, the Satanic Epi-Eugenics Agenda. People can reference that work on my website. But what I continued with after that was to try to really go toward an understanding of dynamics that would heal that divide. And one of the most important concepts that I teach in that regard is that all relationships have to be based first in a connection to truth and source. Otherwise, they can't really be considered genuine relationships. So many people have the idea of a relationship between people as based in simply selfish worldly desires, what you want for yourself, what you want to get out of it, etc. And of course, there's going to be certain aspects of all relationships that are going to be based on that kind of worldliness. Let's not lie, okay? Let's be honest here. There's going to be pragmatic concerns in the world, that are going to be based in self-interest in any nature of any relationship. But if we make that the foundation of the relationship in and of itself is not going to be strong. It's not going to be on firm footing based on a strong foundation. A genuine relationship of any kind between people, I don't care whether it's a relationship between family members, between friends, between coworkers, and especially between life partners in any kind of a romantic relationship, particularly. The basis of it being genuine is going to be whether both people in the relationship have a connection to truth, have a connection to source. So I've drawn this out on a chart on a very simple slide where you have one individual here, you have one individual here, and most people think of the relationship as them coming together forward toward each other. And I look at it like that is the foundation of what I would call a non-genuine relationship. I would call that a relationship that is going to be destined for problems when we're only basing it in worldly one-to-one between both individuals. And that a lot of people would take, would find that unusual. They would disagree. They would say, well, that's the basis of a strong relationship. No, that's the basis of a relationship that is going to be headed for problems in the near future, because
I agree.
if each one of them isn't firmly connected to higher source, higher power, truth, the connection to truth is what has to be the bridge. That's way up here, right? That's in the perfected realm, if you will. It's that which we aspire to, right? And we're each on our individual journeys to try to aspire to that higher power and that higher truth and connection to true self. Okay. And if each individual doesn't have that connection, then the relationship is going to be dysfunctional from its very outset, from its very inception. I look at all genuine relationships as each person is connected, but they're not connected one-to-one like this in just the physical domain. They're connected like this. Each one would be here, and it would form like a triangular shape or a shape of compasses that are connected to that higher source, higher truth, higher self. That's what I consider the very foundational basis of all genuine relationships. And if we don't do that, then we're going to be open to all of the manipulation tactics, to all of the divide and conquer strategies, to all of what I refer to as the polarization dialectics that are put out there to get us to go to war with each other and not focus on the real enemy.
Right. Because it seems to me, and I hear this again and again from men, women, couples. Oh, he completes me. She completes me. I mean, I just want to scream with that craziness, because as you were saying, we have to each come from a place of wholeness and come from a place of strength that's based on truth and anchored in truth. How do you disseminate that, just in terms of practical, like if somebody were to come to you, one of the creators perhaps, or somebody that were to come to you and ask for help in terms of peeling away the sort of layers of illusion that trap this. I mean, it becomes this real relationship prison, like it's soulmate or cellmate, your choice, and to be in that concretized going at it.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with you. The first thing is that you cannot be searching for completeness in the external sense from another. Of course, in relationships, we have complementary aspects of personality. We have, sharing. We have, helping each other. But those aren't completing the person internally from their own personal characteristics aspect. No one can do that for you. Again, as you said, we have to come to a relationship as a complete whole. And the first thing that I would explain to someone looking for advice in that regard would be that you have to understand mental gender. Mental gender is part of hermetics. It's part of the foundations of natural law, the underlying principles of natural law. And it's
the seventh principle.
That's correct. And it is that there is gender in all things. There is a masculine side and a feminine side of everything. Now, this is not related to biological sex. We're not talking about gender insofar as male or female. We are talking about gender as a mental construct and the components or aspects of the makeup of the individual's personality, characteristics, soul, etc. And what it means is that there is an active or masculine aspect, and then there is a passive or feminine aspect within each and every one of us. And when we're working with the feminine, that means that we have to be open, we have to receive. Okay. And that's in the form of receiving information about what is going on within us, what is going on around us, what is going on regarding morality. That a lot of people become closed off to that. They harden to that because of different mind control methods. This is what I talked about on my whole first part of What on Earth is Happening, my podcast series, methods of mental manipulation and influence that close people off from the reception of truth. That is actually a working against their feminine mental aspect or mental gender, because they are not open and being willing to receive proper reception. So, part of what I would work with if a person showed imbalance in that way is trying to help them to quiet the mind. That would mean that they have too much masculine energy in many ways, and they cannot quiet the thoughts to be able to receive new information. So many people have this continuous mental chatter that goes on from the moment they wake up till the moment they fall asleep at night, and they don't know how to quiet that. Not even to permanently silence it, but just to quell it. Because the truth doesn't force itself upon another individual. It's always there. It comes to us with a quiet resolve, you could say. And we have to be the ones to open up that feminine aspect of ourselves to be able to receive that information in order to create positive change and healing in our lives.
Right.
Conversely, there is, the masculine aspect that is action based, that it's the force that propels us and pushes us forward to achieve anything that we want to accomplish in the world. And many people don't have that developed very well. Their willpower has to have work put into it so that they press forward with things that they want to do and accomplish, and to push things through to completion. Now, both of these things have to come together. The feminine care, the care for truth, the care to receive truth and embody truth and take it into oneself, has to be then combined with the masculine aspect of willpower to accomplish things in the world. Now, if both individuals in a relationship are lacking in one of those mental genders or aspects or another, whether they are imbalanced toward the feminine, toward the masculine, whether they have imbalances and not enough of either one of those characteristics internally in a form of balance, the relationship is going to be weakened, because you're not going to be dealing with two whole healed people. You're going to be dealing with either both of them broken or traumatized and in a state of mental imbalance, or you're going to be dealing with one who might be somewhat complete, whole in that regard, healed in that regard, and then another person who is acting as, you could say, perhaps the weak link in the relationship, that is not putting enough of that internal work to create that balance and healing within themselves. And that's going to act as a drag on the relationship. Either both people are, or perhaps one of them will, in many different aspects. So that's where I would start, is looking at the dynamic of mental gender and looking at where weaknesses are in either individual, and working on healing those divides, healing those traumas, putting work into creating that level of healing and wholeness within each individual.
That is really hard work, kids.
Exceptionally hard.
Yeah, because there's so many distractions in our inner screen. And especially if you don't have the wherewithal to invoke those practices to quiet the mind, to quiet the body, to even be in a receptive mode. Because I'm hearing so many people being way distracted about what's going on in the world, and they're not minding the inner world of their own inner landscape of the war that's happening within their own masculine and feminine, and there just seems to be such a misunderstanding of that. So thank you for that, because I think you're absolutely right. The seventh principle is crucial in really understanding the sort of dynamics that you have to be aware of to even be steady in moving forward in unpacking all that mind control and the sort of gender divide, which in my opinion, I mean, it starts out in our family of origin, our first cult, quote unquote, because that's where we learn how to be men and women by witnessing our family dynamics with mom and dad or whoever our caretakers were, or through, of course, media, mass media in terms of television and movies. I know from my experience, I mean, that was ultimately confusing for me to even try to extrapolate how I'm supposed to be, and I didn't grow up with a father, so I didn't have that. Um, what was your own journey like in terms of your sort of awakening process of what you witnessed in relationship dynamics as you were growing up?
Oh, very interesting. And again, this all leads back to work that I've done regarding parental abandonment issues.
Yes.
Because if both parents aren't present, and or if any parents are absent in um, duties, it's not just physical absence when we're talking about parental abandonment problems with people growing up and even into their adulthood going unresolved. Um, it's that parents may have been weak in certain aspects of providing for their child's developmental growth, and that acts as a form of abandonment. So my situation was somewhat similar to what you just explained with yours, that my father divorced my mother, my parents divorced while I was still in the womb, 5 months pregnant. My mother was when my parents divorced, and so I didn't have, my biological father most of the time during my formative years. I did, however, have a very good masculine influence in the form of my maternal grandfather, my grandfather on my mother's side. And, so that was the main parental figure that I, grew up around learning from regarding masculine traits. I also my grandmother on my mother's side as well basically helped raise me while my mother worked as a single parent. I did have a relationship and a positive one with my biological father. It wasn't like there was absolutely no interaction there. It just was infrequent.
Mhm.
So that absolutely is something that would work as an abandonment dynamic for
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
no question about it.
Yeah.
And I had to do a lot of healing work to work through that. Now, it seems to have not hit me as hard as, let's say, my sister, who was older at the time. I have an older sister, and it hit her much harder, the separation, because it was done at at a time when she was very conscious of what was happening, where I was still not born yet
Mhm.
during the actual separation and divorce. And so it was sort of like just the way things were for me from the time that I was born. Looking back at it later, and after I reached adulthood, I would say it definitely had a lot of impact and a profound effect on my psychology,
Mhm.
which, again, as you know from knowing my background, led in a very, very dark direction when
Yes.
I was younger, toward the world of dark occultism and Satanism.
Yeah.
And I feel like perhaps that absolutely was a trigger dynamic for that,
Mhm.
certainly an influencing factor. Not to blame it on anything. Of
Yeah.
course, we all make our own choices. But This is something that I really unpack in my work deeply when it comes to abandonment issues. If we have to look at psychological abandonment, we have to look at emotional abandonment.
Absolutely.
Physical abandonment is only one side of it,
Yes.
not being present. There's many ways that a child can be let down by their parenting. People can provide for physical and creature comforts, and there not be a lot of emotional support,
Yeah.
not be a
Yeah.
lot of love in the relationship. It can go the other way, where there's tons of love in the relationship, but there's a lot of being not cared for enough from a physical perspective, and always having issues, psychological issues of being insecure for physical care and
Yeah.
comfort.
Yeah.
So all of those contribute to that dynamic. And one of the main things that I teach is people have to do internal shadow work, meaning confronting all of the negative dynamics, especially when it comes to the type of trauma that results from parental abandonment issues, both physical and non-physical.
Here,
And
here.
sit down with themselves and really, really analyze those aspects, those traumas within themselves, and ask themselves deep internal psychological questions, such as, obviously, how is this affecting other areas of one's life? How is this
Yes.
affecting relationships? What can you do to realize that's something that did occur? Yes, it's going to inform upon certain aspects of your makeup, but none of that needs be permanent. It does not have to be a permanent thing, a permanent trauma that you continue to
Yes.
carry into new endeavors and new relationships and new areas of your life.
Yeah.
You can treat it as something that occurred, that
That
you
is a
have
bit
to
of mind
acknowledge.
control, that once you're traumatized, you're forever and ever and ever ad nauseum. And then within the world constructs of all these shit shows, especially some of the psychological shit shows, they advocate, they actually reward you, and you can weaponize
Sure.
woundology and blame everybody. I'm curious
It's
that
victim mentality.
yeah,
We don't want to fall into that type of victim mentality,
no,
because then it becomes part of our believed identity,
exactly.
right? It's not who we are.
Yeah,
It's something that happened. And
exactly.
then we can deal with the trauma at a psychological and
Yeah,
spiritual level and emotional level, work through it. You never ignore it. You turn, you confront it, you accept it, you work through it. With shadow work and
yeah,
psychological work and emotional healing. And then you decide who you are going to be in spite of that having happened,
right on.
and possibly being even stronger because it happened.
Mhm.
You can
Yeah.
look at it as
I mean,
something that,
that's been my experience. I'm
sure.
curious, what were the pivotal moments for you where you really had the awareness that, wow, I'm in trouble here. I need to like really, really dig in and find my way out of this.
Yeah, my dark night of the soul came in my mid 20s approximately, and yeah, that's after I had already been involved with dark occultism,
Mhm.
Satanism in particular, and realized that people in these organizations were all working together toward a common agenda for not just themselves, but for the entire world, and that was human slavery. You know, that when that fully hit my mind, that's what this entire network all over the world was truly working toward. That was my dark night of the soul. Then I realized, wow, I'm involved in this. I'm helping these people
Yeah.
do this.
Yeah.
They're not just doing this to me. They're doing it to everybody. They're doing it to my family, my friends, everybody
Yeah.
I've ever known. It's not just an agenda against one group of people. It's an agenda against humanity.
Against humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I realized that, that was the thing that really, really put me into a state of deep depression. I mean, that was, again, I describe it in my podcasts and other work that I've done, as it was probably the worst depression that I've ever felt in my life. I literally laid in bed like playing dark, depressing music all day, barely getting up for like practically months, almost a year's time. To just go to the bathroom and eat, and if that, and just laying in bed most of the day depressed, and trying to work through what I had just gotten involved with and what I was going to do in the aftermath of that, realizing, okay, I have stepped away from it. I'm no longer directly involved. I've broken those associations, but now what am I going to do?
Yeah. Were there certain practices that really were inspirational in terms of turning it around for you?
Well, again, these were the early days of the internet, still in modem use days, like 56K modems and things like that, until I finally got a higher speed internet connection. I started downloading a lot of self-help, psychology, spirituality, practices, techniques, audio books, and then applying them. Transcendental meditation certainly helped. Work with plant medicines certainly helped me. Again, that has to be done in a very conscious context if it's going to be engaged. I do not advocate for using that, wildly or abusing that. Right. It's got to be done carefully if it's going to be engaged at all. All of those healing methods and modalities are what I used early on after I got out of the Satanic Network and started working on my own inner psychology through that type of shadow work. Meditation was a big one because it really helped me learn how to quiet the mind. Again, not just beat it into submission and force something, but to work steadily to be able to simply learn how to listen. This is another, thing that everybody has to learn how to do in relationships, and everybody can always use more practice doing, of course. But, learning how to listen to teachers was a big part of my healing. A lot of people can't. A lot of people, you put something on, they can't sit through it. They talk over it. They can't really hear what's being said because their thoughts are chattering while
they fast forward. That's my favorite thing. I watch people do that. Oh, I went to the end. I just, went to the end. But then, you miss the entirety of the presentation, but you can have an opinion about it. It's weird.
It's like skipping to the end of a science book, and getting the most complex equations without learning the basic ones. You're skipping ahead in a mathematics book. You're trying to learn calculus 4 before you learned arithmetic. It doesn't really work like that.
It does not.
It's just building and working into the truth is a stepwise progression. It's like, building a muscle. You're not going to go for the heaviest weights first. You're going to start with the lighter weights and work your way up. And that's what I had to learn to do, of course, like anybody else. And I had to put my mindset into a state of proper reception to receive the truth, which is actually feminine work. It's healing the wounded feminine mental gender. That's what was really damaged within me. And, it's not to say you're becoming more, quote, feminine. You're working, you're engaging the feminine gender within the individual. While I am masculine in biology, in biological sex, I'm male, I'm working internally with the feminine aspect of the psyche. And that was to be able to, again, open up, accept, take information in, process it, etc. And when I started doing that, I went far deeper into hidden knowledge. I explain this to people. They think, well, once you woke up to the evil of the occult world, wouldn't you just abandon it altogether? And that's exactly the opposite of what I did. I went deeper into the occult to find out what these evil people were hiding. What information were they hiding that they were sitting on or trying to keep away from other people, not to get them to know, not to get them to process and comprehend, that would really level the playing field and, challenge their power that they've held for millennia. And that's what I did.
That was very true of New Age bullshit. in my opinion. I mean, my experience of new age bullshit and some of the psychological models that I worked with, I mean, they really advocated that you would come to an end and you should be so satisfied that you come to this end. And then I was like, what the fuck? There was something really off about it. And then you realize, oh, these people are satanic too. They
Yeah,
want you to think that you know it all and that
right.
you're not going to question reality and that
There
you're
really
going to
is
sit
no
there.
end to learning.
Yes,
There is no end. It
precisely.
goes on and on, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
And yeah, it's so dangerous. Some of the ideologies contained in New Ageism, in the New Age movement. Number one, not looking at the negative. You know, that's the big one. They would have us not. They would have us just all love and light.
yeah. Yeah,
Just
la
all
la
good
la la
feels.
la la la. Yeah, throw fairy dice. I have been ousted out of some of these new age love and light groups, and I haven't been a teacher and instructor because I'm just like, no, we need to look at this. And then I'm a bad person because of it. And
Wild.
I was accused of being satanic exactly for that. And I'm like, okay, whatever.
See,
Just
they don't
move
want
on.
the real dark occultists want that form of New Age mentality,
Yes.
ideology out there because they don't want people healing. They don't want them doing that level of shadow work to
No, they
become
don't.
stronger and healed of their traumas. They
Yes.
want them in a state of false belief that they are okay, that they are healed when they've never actually improved themselves and strengthened
Yes.
themselves through that shadow work. That's why
Yes.
they want that mentality out there.
Yeah. My favorite one was all is allowed. And for somebody like me, who's actually done a lot of work with rape camps, have seen the aftermath of some of these fucked up like blood ritual sacrifices. I'm sorry, all is not good. It's not all
Sure,
good, assholes. It really
sure.
isn't. This is evil. There is evil, 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 evil. It exists, and you are allowing it to exist by willfully ignoring it and giving it a pass and saying it's all good. I
See,
just
they're making the critical error of trying to ascribe the ultimate form of consciousness as what's here on this level of existence that we're inhabiting right now, right? If you
Mhm.
say, okay, ultimately the all, right, the divine expression of consciousness, if you will, is goodness, it's love, it's wholeness, it's completeness, etc. Wonderful. That's not the level of consciousness we are experiencing in this plane of existence
No, it is
because there are
not.
lessons to be learned here to learn, to integrate, to become stronger as a result of learning and integrating. And then we could go on to the next level where
Yes.
perhaps it is a better form of existence, form of consciousness. But you don't just jump from A to Z,
No.
or even A to M,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You have to go in a stepwise
Yeah. It's
progression.
very incremental, and there are all these iterations, and each iteration requires an integration of the previous lessons, and there's even an up leveling of all those lessons as well. I know
Sure.
for me, there's certain aspects of my personality, and especially, the darkness that I've absorbed. And every time I think I'm done with it, oh, I get surprised. It's like, oh shit, there she is. It's
Let's give you a
very, very
little
interesting.
test to see if you
Yeah,
really learned it.
exactly, exactly. Hi, remember me? And it's quite shocking, and I've actually had the latest iteration of it, and it's a certain form of complex PTSD that willfully tries to inject this evil sort of thread throughout my psyche. And if I'm not aware, I can just get overrun and overtaken by it.
Sure.
And it'll take me 6 months to pull myself out of that shitstorm. And it's
This is a reminder of that we really have to be rooted and focused in the present moment to truly be present.
Yes.
Because if we're not truly present, then things come our way and we're not even conscious of
Yeah.
what's happening. We
Yeah.
get caught by surprise. We
Yeah.
get blindsided.
Yes.
This is like psychic self-defense. Of course,
absolutely.
there's self-defense.
Absolutely. You have to own your attention.
That's it.
I tell people, you own your attention, and that's what being spiritually awake is. You own your attention. Right. The Matrix doesn't own it. Shit shows don't own it. Your past doesn't own it. Your traumas don't own it.
And that's so much of what's thrust before us, I mean, they want us ensconced in drama. They want us ensconced in infighting. They want us all focused on 3D worldly events and happenings that we then work ourselves up over, right? And not to say don't be aware of them, okay? Be aware of what's happening in the world, right? But when you give all negative energy to it, and that's all you're focusing on, you're not focusing on helping people learn the truth of morality, right? That they're not changing their mind regarding all of the structures and institutions in our world and the evils that they do and the evils that they perpetuate, because they're not really focused on first principles in the mind, right? They haven't learned those first principles.
Yes.
That's it.
It makes me crazy. And I go on and on about it. People are going, there she goes. She's ranting about it. But it's basic. It really is basic. You have to go there, and not only go there, but to apply when you are there to all these different aspects of your life that are not working. And why isn't it working? Right. I mean, it's one of the bases of, the name of your conference, Free Your Mind. Right. Hello, nurse. It's like, there we go, right there. I mean, it's brilliant title, because it just, you go right to that first principle.
You think, that's the very first Hermetic principle, the all is mental. So that means that everything that follows mental constructs is what we're going to build and create in the very real physical 3D space that we inhabit.
Yes.
And so nothing can change inside the space that we are inhabiting in the physical world until the constructs of thought and mind change internally in each one of us.
Yes.
So this is a gigantic part of relationship building. This is a gigantic part of how do you create positive change in any endeavor of life. You could look at just, the whole freedom movement and freedom community, people saying, I want more freedom in life. I want government out of my life. I want less control, less externally imposed control. What about all the other ways that we can improve our lives?
Yes.
How we can improve family dynamics, we can improve friendships, we can improve what we're doing as far as resources and of course relationships. It all starts with the thoughts that we think. We are powerful co-creators. Our thoughts are so powerful. I said in another interview recently, if your thoughts are so powerful that if you tell yourself you can't do something, that becomes the reality. If you tell yourself you can do something, that becomes the reality. That's how powerful your thoughts are.
Yeah, it amazes me that a lot of the folks who say they are natural law advocates aren't even working with that first principle. I mean, I mention it and they're looking at me like, what are you talking about? Like what? And you have to up level your thought quality.
Sure.
And that's an ongoing practice. You have to catch yourself every time you that self-talk of being a loser. It's too late. We're going to hell in a handbasket. I mean, all of that stuff needs to be checked. You need to check yourself on what it is that you are broadcasting in your own head, because when you're in there, everything in imagination is 1000% correct. Hasn't materialized yet, so you better get your ass in gear and get clear on what it is that you're, at what you're vibing with. And that includes your emotional countenance.
I try to teach people to be as realistic and pragmatic as possible regarding it. Not to have hope, this wild-eyed optimistic hope of everything's just going to work out and it doesn't really require any action. You see that
Oh
in
God.
the savior movement, the psyops of
Yes, the
Q,
aliens are
etc.,
gonna come
all that.
help us. They're gonna
Yeah.
save us. Oh.
Yep. The alien savior complex, the religious figure savior complex, etc. It comes in many, many different forms.
Yes.
So we can't have that level of wild-eyed optimism in the form of hopium, but you can't have despair, doom, and gloom all the time either, because then that's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. There has to be this balance of realism where we're looking at the dynamic and we realize, yes, if it stays on this trajectory, things are going to be bad. We're not going to get what we want. It's not going to work out well for us. However, that is still changeable because it's all driven by the mental dynamic. It's all driven by that first principle, that if we can change our thoughts about what we believe, about what we are perceiving, then we can change the outcome that's going to happen down the road in the future.
I love that. Thank you. Oh my God. When I first started studying the Hermetic principles, I was like, I think I was 12. A neighbor was getting rid of all these books, and one of them was a tattered version of the Kabbalion, which smelled like cat piss. and you're like, I'm just like going, oh man, but I was floored because it was on alignment with just so many things that I was interested in. And that was my reality. I mean, growing up, I was raised by a man-hating psychopath, crazy person. And so my out was being in my imagination and imagining I was a magical fairy. That's how I survived that craziness before I had the gumption to move the fuck out when I was a very young teenager. I was 14. It had to happen. But it's like those principles were my go-tos to, oh, I could do this. And changing my self-talk from, what was pounded into me by my mother, changing not just that, but, seeing the correspondence, the cause and effect of everything that I was doing are the things that I shouldn't be doing, and understanding that everything has a consequence to it.
Sure.
And you stop. You just fucking apply your will, and you don't do that shit anymore that is causing you harm or is delaying your forward motion, because you keep getting tripped up on something that really is not worthy. And so I really had some very intense moments of realism, and and of course the cosmic abandonment of my family and wanting to belong, and realizing, oh, well, I belong to myself, I belong to the all. And that was enough for me, honestly.
It's really awesome that you encountered that at such a young age. That's pretty interesting that came to you in that way, just as those lessons were needed. That's often how it happens.
Yeah.
And to speak to part of that dynamic that you just were talking about, so much of the problems that we experience in life are self-generated. They're self-created issues.
Yes, they are.
Suffering, the concept of suffering in something like Buddhism or other Eastern thought is it just basically says that life contains suffering. A lot of people distort that in modern Buddhist teachings and say life is suffering. No, life is not suffering. Life contains suffering.
Yes.
How much suffering life contains can be changed. It can be adjusted, because there are forms of suffering that are self-inflicted, that we are inflicting upon ourselves, not only as individuals, but as a species. And we can learn how not to do that, how to change the way that we're thinking so that we do not inflict self-inflicted suffering. Yes. It's very it all goes back to that principle of cause and effect. Again, we've been definitely working our way through a lot of the Hermetic principles in this talk related to, what humanity is doing it to itself, what we are doing to each other, and in relationships as well, causing them to become distorted, toxic, etc. And that cause and effect principle is one of the most important of all, because there is an underlying reason that self-inflicted suffering is happening. It's not just happening by itself. Every effect that we are experiencing has an underlying cause.
Oh,
our
it's
goal, largely, that's usually the answer, oddly enough, right? See, what our goal has to be is we have to become good at diagnosing the causal factors that underlie problems. That's what humanity has been very poor at doing, unfortunately, up till this point. We haven't looked at the causal factors. We want to keep looking at all the results, at all the effects, right? So this is called the plane of effects in occult in occult psychology and occult philosophy. The plane of effects is that which has manifested. It's done. It happened. It happened because of previous underlying causal factors.
Faulty beliefs, faulty thoughts, all of that. And, the whole thing with the polarity too, that was huge for me, because I realized, the victim, perpetrator. I realized I'm fucking doing it to myself. I am the victim. I'm also the perpetrator of my misery.
And if it keeps going on as a cycle and you're not breaking the cycle, it's a feedback loop. One energy feeds into another.
And eventually, hopefully, you get so fucking sick of yourself that you just you snap out of it and make a shift.
And that aha moment usually comes in the form, if we're really receiving a true epiphany, will come in the form of realizing that we have to go deeper into that internal work and find the causal factor, find the thing that is actually creating the effect, that is making the effect happen. And that is almost always inside the nature of the way we are currently thinking. And the good news about that is not a permanently programmed, predestined thing. That can be changed. That can be changed by an act of our will, because we have been given free will by the creator of the universe to direct our thoughts and to change them if we so choose to do so.
So I want to share with you my earliest cause and effect little bit of action, taking action. I was a toddler. And so my family dynamics, everybody got zombified in front of the boob tube, and there was some kind of thing that was like going on. I don't remember. Everybody was upset. And so here I am. I'm like 2. I walk around where the television is plugged in. I just unplugged it. It made so much sense to me. The TV is causing everybody to be upset. Everybody's, all crazy. I'm just going to eliminate it. How about that? And, it seemed.
I guess that didn't go over too well, did it?
No, it did not. It did not go over very well. But, for me as a little fairy child, it's like, what is wrong with you people? Why are you going to sit there and allow this thing to sit there and transmit? And you're sitting there as a, zombified receiver, and you're not doing anything about it. You're just letting it affect you in this way that is, I couldn't take it, And so I realized early on, you know what, I'm on my own. And, so I think in many ways I dodged some bullets, because I was able to, at a very young age, discern and know there's something really off here and no one is getting it,
It's amazing how much their forms of media that they control and are putting out there are just doing an absolute number on humanity. Again, I was talking about this recently in another interview with people watching TV, how difficult that is, how much of an entrainment process that form of mind control is. And it acts as like a even if you are attempting to reach a person that is that's a big TV watcher, they go back to that signal, to that transmission signal. And what you have to do is you have to try to de-entrain them from it by removing them from its presence for longer
that's very
durations,
true.
for
They get a
longer
dopamine
intervals.
rush from it. So
Sure.
they're
It's like a
being
drug. Yeah.
they're being drugged out with these neurotransmitters. I mean, it's like I watch it happen. You can see the consciousness is just glazed
Sure.
over and it's receding. It's quite disturbing. And I see it. It's a satanic ritual to me.
See, they figured out in that method of transmission how to put someone into a mild trance such that they're in that receptive state automatically. It's a bodily response. It's a physio-psychological response that the person goes into that reception state, that passive feminine reception state immediately, instead of having to willfully choose to place themselves in that state because of a genuine desire to learn something, where you willfully choose to quell and quiet the mind and then receive that new information, but then not immediately accept it, right? See, genuine intelligence means that you receive something, but you don't immediately accept it. You accept the true aspects of it once you process it and separate the truth from the falsehood, if there is any. You separate the opposing ideas that are contradictory in logic, right? That's the trivium process. The middle step of the trivium is the logical processing step of the trivium. And you always have to do that before you ever act upon that information, before you fully accept it and then act upon it. You always have to do that logical processing step of the trivium. Critically important. Otherwise, you're receiving things that half of them could be true, half of them could be false. And then you're acting upon the half that are false, which is a dangerous proposition that we don't want to go down. That's why, again, it's about also not only the Hermetic principles in learning how to navigate things in life, things going on in our internal world, in relationships with others, but it's also the steps of the initiatory process, initiation, true beginning something that is new, initiating something has these 5 steps to it. And the first is we have to be honest with ourselves at all times, right? That's the very first step. This is the first step in any improvement process, is stop telling yourself lies about where you're at. Be honest and start from where you're at. Right? Don't try to lie and say you're any better off than you are. Don't make it doom and gloom and say it's way worse and it's impossible. Be honest, right? Be realistic. Tell yourself the truth first and foremost. The second step, stop being a wild-eyed dreamer and imagining that things are just going to be super, super simple. No one promised this would be simple. It's a challenge for a reason. It's a challenge to toughen us up. It's a challenge to help us to motivate ourselves and others to improve ourselves and improve our world and the quality of our experience here on Earth. And then the third step is you got to learn how to think. This goes right back to what we were just talking about. You have to be able to perform logical processing upon information that comes in that you receive. When you do that correctly, then you're going to weed out all the inconsistencies, the lies, all the stuff that doesn't serve who we are. Then we're in a position to properly act upon it, right? And then we have to always be in the present moment, because new challenges, new things, new aspects are always going to come at us. And if we're not ready, if we're not fully in the present, we're going to be missing things. Things are going to be slipping by us. People are going to be getting things over on us that have ill intentions. That's right. And finally, you got to always take care of the body. You got to take care of the body. You got to activate the body. Exercise good nutrition, exercise, physically exercise, practice self-defense, practice martial arts, because the body is needed. The body is not, it's not dispensable. It is indispensable toward our continued evolutionary development.
And our bodies are the vehicles through which the masculine and feminine energies are animating.
That's right.
Moving us from our creations, from formless into form. I'm a lifelong martial artist. So, I'm lucky that way. People say, well, it's easy for you. Actually, no, it's not easy, but it isn't that hard either, because I've always been consistent about it, because I don't feel good if I don't move.
That's right.
I don't feel
It's
good. I
about
don't want to feel like a
constant
slug.
practice.
Yes. Yeah.
Constant practice, constant improvement. That's it. Steady, constant improvement. I talk about this in my How to Become the True Media seminar. One of the main tenets in it is be persistent. You have to put in the work. You have to put in the time. You have to put in the attention. If you don't put in those resources, you don't get a return on your investment.
Yes,
You got to put the
exactly.
time and attention in and practice constantly. It's the same for learning technology as it is for martial arts or training in any
Yes,
physical aspect.
it's repetitive. It is a practice.
Right.
And that was one of the things with New Age bullshit that I just found fascinating, was the whole concept of spiritual awakening, that is this one-off thing, and all of a sudden you're aligned with the angels and everything is like beautiful, and everything in your life is going to be perfect. The cellulite on your ass is going to be gone overnight. And I was thinking to myself, people are actually buying this bullshit. Like, no, it is not a one-off event. It's constant, because there's so many freaking distractions coming at us, hijacking our attention, trying to get us to do things that we really shouldn't be doing, or trying to get us to continue doing things we shouldn't be doing.
Of course. Yeah, and that's what I tell people. The whole solution is that we have to stop doing things we shouldn't be doing. It's not to necessarily create any new, program or new experience or new solution. We're doing things that we don't have the right to do. Most people in the world. And they just have to stop doing those things. We have to stop thinking the way we're thinking and stop doing the behaviors that we're doing. And largely, most of the self-inflicted suffering will cease. And what's interesting about what you got into there, about some of the things we've been talking about during this entire interview, is we brought up the presentations that were about the attack upon the masculine and the feminine. Where we started was mental gender. And the presentations that I largely did on those things were, of course, order followers, the destruction of the sacred feminine, and then New Age bullshit, which is the suppression of the sacred masculine, and then unholy feminine, which was about how the feminine has been leveraged in a negative way to continue to propagate mind control and division between the sexes. I feel like I have not even said enough on those things, and that I have addendums in the future coming to those topics. One of the things I could continue to go on regarding New Ageism is, many different aspects, of course, but again, not doing the internal shadow work because it's perceived as negative, and also looking for external saviors, or also taking shortcuts, as you just talked about. They think that awakening is like one instant satori moment or something like that, and then everything is fine after that moment. And no knowledge is required, no deep, hard-won knowledge over years of study, I want to address those aspects at some point in the future with maybe a future presentation. But one of the things a lot of people don't know about is I have planned a second part of Unholy Feminine. I may do that in the near future, Unholy Feminine Part 2, because I left so many things out. That presentation got so long, I had to actually weed it down when I delivered it back at one of the Free Your Mind conferences.
It was awesome. I was there when you did it. I was cheering.
That was Free Your Mind 4. Yeah. And I had to wean that one down. I had to take a lot out of that I wanted to include because of the length of the presentation. And big part of it was the physical aspect of that. Because my presentation for the first Unholy Feminine was largely about the mental, psychological dynamics in that form of mind control and in that form of divide and conquer. I left out a lot of the physical aspects of it. Part of what I was going to get into is all of the things, the biological types of attack that go into the destruction of testosterone, which is so important for both men and women.
Absolutely. Yes.
And there's a war on it.
These are not men hormones or women hormones. I mean, it just
They're human hormones.
exactly.
It's the
Yeah.
drive hormone. It's the will hormone. It
Yeah.
has a lot to do with what we are going to accomplish in the world. It has a lot to do with our
Right.
will to sustain
Yeah.
any endeavor that we're doing. And
Yeah.
of course, things like libido. Another aspect that I was going to bring up in Unholy Feminine was all of the health benefits of human sexuality,
Yes.
literally the physical benefits of it.
Yeah.
And I had tons of research lined up for that aspect because I was talking about how they're trying to drive a wedge sexually between men and women.
Absolutely.
And I had a ton of research that I want to eventually roll into a new presentation and addendum to that regarding health benefits of sexuality as well. So that could all be coming in the near future for new presentations in my work.
I know that it's a very integral part of my work with my survivors of trafficking, because, you know, they've had the pleasure principle hijacked to a point where, you know, it's either non-existent or it is such a it's polarized
and tied in with pain and trauma.
Absolutely.
You know, interwoven in a distorted, non-healthy way. Yeah.
Yeah. So we explore a lot of those iterations, and it's powerful work. And it's work that needs to, you know, it needs to happen. And it's painstaking work, because this isn't about, you know, the whole hijacking of sexuality, of, you know, making it all sex positive and anything goes, and if anything doesn't go, then, you know, you're fucked up and you're the problem. It's like, no. This is advocating for and practicing the principle of vibration, of frequency, that, you know, there are higher and lower echelons of frequency, and we have to pay attention to that, because the lower echelons of frequency are actually very harmful.
And many of them are inversions based on satanic inversion principle.
Absolutely. And open you to being hijacked by a lower plane demonic entity. So, you know, that's not what we want to do.
And of course, it's all got to be based in the very principle of consent, you know, of not trying to force anything upon anybody, or especially force it upon people who don't have properly developed, you know, psychology in that respect because of their young age. I mean, how many distorted sexual things are forced upon children or thrust upon children anymore?
Especially nowadays, where, I mean, we're just, the landscape, so much of it within the matrix is just utterly what the fuck, in my opinion, you know. And having raised children, I'm glad I'm not raising children right now. I mean, I just can't even imagine the kinds of landmines that parents, in terms of conscious parenting, have to navigate in order to, you know, just be well aware of what's happening.
And, you know, I think that's a perfect topic to end the whole, to wrap it all up with, because if conscious parenting is practiced, if people who are going to plan families now and want children and want to bring them into this world, if they really practice the techniques of true awakening and conscious parenting, that is the greatest gift that could ever be given to a human being, to a young human being, is to have parents who already understand many of these things and are going to then pass that knowledge along to the next generation growing up. We didn't really have that. At least I know that I didn't. I had to explore that on my own. You know, I had to discover these things on my own. And, you know, while we, neither of us right now have children right now at this moment in time, I've never been a father, but I feel like I'm giving the information out to many potential parents to help them go about parenting in a conscious fashion. And that is, I feel, one of the most balancing dynamics that can be done and can be practiced, because if we start people on the correct information regarding all of that is going on in our world, and especially objective morality and natural law when they are very young and their minds are still in that formative developmental state, they're going to go far. They are going to be powerful co-creators when they grow up and get older, and they're going to influence a whole lot more people. So that's one of my personal goals. And
mine as well. I think
it's one of the most important things that we could ever talk about and teach in the world is conscious parenting techniques. So I think that's a pretty good place to wrap it up, Marja. And I want to thank you for the phenomenal talk. Great topics, great questions, very different topics than what I usually get into, although we connected much of my work to them.
I love them. I'll have all the links to the presentations. These presentations, kids, powerful. I mean, Mark just cuts to the chase. And and you're going to be very uncomfortable, and it's fun uncomfortable. I enjoyed the hell out of them. So yes, thank you, Mark, so much for your time, your consideration, your work, for just everything that you do. I so appreciate it. And that's it, my beautiful kids. And so until next time, here is to Love, Truth, and Beauty. Mwah!